Welcome to this explainer. Let's get right into it, because today we are on a mission to completely dismantle one of the biggest, most deeply ingrained societal myths about building wealth. For decades, we've been fed this very specific storyline about what it actually means to be financially successful. But today, we're going to look at the raw data and the real math to see if that story actually holds up. So we have to confront this question right out of the gate. You've probably heard this a million times, right? It's the advice older generations constantly repeat. Renting is just paying someone else's mortgage, or renting is throwing your money away. People treat it like an undisputed financial law. But today, we're pulling back the curtain on the true cost of ownership to see why this classic piece of wisdom might actually be the exact thing trapping you in a cycle of stress. Let's start right here with a surprisingly simple number. $770. That is the average monthly payment for a new car in America today. Now, most people just look at that and think, well, okay, that's just what it takes to get to work. But we are going to expose the massive, invisible price tag attached to ownership, and it starts right in your driveway. Section 1, the myth of ownership, unpacking the American dream. We live in a society that aggressively equates owning things, brand new cars, massive houses, with automatic financial success. The moment you hold a shiny new key, everyone applauds. But nobody throws a party for the massive liabilities you just signed up for, do they? We celebrate buying new things, but we completely ignore the mathematical reality of what that purchase is doing to our future. The crucial point is perfectly captured in this quote from our sources. Every dollar of debt you take on now is future income you've already spent. Really think about that. When you buy things you can't actually afford by financing them, you are literally reaching into the future, grabbing your future self's paycheck and spending it today. Your future self is starting every single month in the red, just paying off your past decisions. Section 2. The $2.4 million car, the opportunity cost of the commute. We tend to view a car payment as just another monthly utility bill for transportation, but the math tells a vastly different story about what that payment is actually doing to your net worth. It's wild when you look at the sheer scale of the difference. Think about taking that $770 monthly car payment and pouring it into an asset that is rapidly losing value the literal second you drive it off the lot. Now, imagine if you took that exact same $770 and invested it in the market at a historical 8% return over a 40-year working life. The result of that investment? $2.4 million. That is the true opportunity cost of your average car payment. You see, the average person isn't too poor to become a millionaire. The average person is simply financing a depreciating chunk of metal on a 72-month schedule instead of buying an appreciating asset. That car isn't costing you $770 a month. It is literally costing you $2.4 million of future wealth. Which brings us perfectly to the biggest purchase of all, housing. Section 3, renting versus buying math. Brian versus Rachel. To make this dead fair, let's say they both have identical $90,000 incomes and exactly $50,000 saved up. Brian decides to buy a house, while Rachel decides to rent the exact same house right down the street. Let's walk through their lives on paper. Brian's life is suddenly full of friction. He burned $10 grand on closing costs, he signed 40 documents, and he is now emotionally handcuffed to an asset that requires him to worry about leaky roofs and weird plumbing noises. Rachel, on the flip side, paid absolutely zero in closing costs. She just got a quick confirmation email for her $2,000 a month rent. Her wealth is liquid, safely parked in index funds. Brian is stuck with a heavy, stressful physical asset, while Rachel has a lightweight, highly mobile financial portfolio. And this brilliantly illustrates the trap Brian fell into. Brian tells everyone his mortgage is $2,360 a month. But here's the catch. That's just the base fee. When we break this down, we have to add the unrecoverable costs. You're looking at $350 for property taxes, $200 for soaring insurance premiums, $150 for private mortgage insurance, and a conservative $340 for maintenance. Brian isn't paying $2,360 to live there. His true out-the-door cost is $3,400 every single month. There is a totally brilliant way to think about this. The roof has a calendar and you weren't invited. I love that because maintenance isn't a string of bad luck. It's a schedule. Water heaters die every 10 years. Roofs need replacing every 20. These are inevitable, hostile financial hits that you literally invite into your life the moment you sign a mortgage. Brian has an $8,000 bill waiting for him. He just doesn't know what month it's going to arrive. Meanwhile, take a look at Rachel's financial engine. Because she didn't buy, she instantly invested the $51,000 she would have spent on a down payment and closing costs. Furthermore, she takes the $1,400 difference between her $2,000 rent and Brian's $3,400 true cost, and she invests that every single month. She has zero maintenance surprises. If the water heater breaks, she makes a 2-minute phone call to her landlord and goes about her day. And if a dream job opens up across the country, she has complete geographic freedom to just pack up and go. Section 4. The 5% rule, calculating the unrecoverable costs.
So how do you actually know which path makes sense for you? Well, let's introduce a practical tool you can use in your own life to calculate the real unrecoverable drain of owning property. The 5% rule is a beautifully simple financial formula. It takes all the money you essentially light on fire when you own a home, property taxes, maintenance, and the opportunity cost of your down payment not being invested in the market, and it lumps it all into one number. This allows you to objectively compare the unrecoverable cost of buying against the unrecoverable cost of monthly rent.
Let's see how this math actually builds using Brian's house as an example. Step 1. Brian bought a $415,000 house. You multiply that by 5% and you get $20,750. Step 2. Divide that by 12 months. That equals roughly $1,700 a month. Step 3. Compare that to rent. Brian's unrecoverable costs, meaning money he will never see again, is $1,700 a month. Rachel is paying $2,000 a month in rent. When you look at the true unrecoverable costs, the gap between renting and buying is incredibly narrow, which completely busts the myth that renting is automatically a waste.
Section 5. Access over ownership, the B2B secret. Let's pivot for a second from personal finance over to commercial business. Because if owning things was the ultimate cheat code to wealth, you would expect ruthless, profit-driven companies to buy everything, right? But the secret of the B2B world is that the smartest companies vastly prefer renting over buying. Imagine a builder needs a concrete cutter for 10 days. They have two options. They can buy the machine for a massive $300,000 upfront cost or rent it for $8,000. Obviously, they rent it. Why on earth absorb the depreciation, the storage costs, and the maintenance of a heavy machine when you can just pay a fraction of the cost for the time you actually use it?
And that brings us to this core truth. Smart money pays for utility, not ownership. Businesses pay for access. They want the results of the machine. They don't want the burden of owning the machine. And this directly validates Rachel's renter mindset. Paying for access to a roof over your head without taking on the heavy, depreciating liabilities of maintenance is often an incredibly smart financial move.
Section 6. The true cost revealed. The real reason buyers win.
Now, you might be wondering, if ownership is filled with so many hidden costs and traps, why do buyers still mathematically win in the real world? The ultimate irony is captured perfectly right here. A mortgage is a savings plan you aren't allowed to skip. On paper, Rachel wins hands down. But out in the real world, most renters aren't Rachel. Most renters don't diligently invest that $1,400 monthly difference into index funds. They spend it on takeout, nicer cars, and lifestyle creep. Buying a house works for most people, not because bricks are magical, but because the bank forces you to build equity at gunpoint every single month. So to summarize the real traps of these major life purchases, the biggest danger is blindly following old slogans without actually doing the math for your specific city and your specific life. Renting only wins if you aggressively invest the difference instead of blowing it. And the absolute biggest trap of all is letting heavy physical assets and massive debt dictate your future choices and limit your freedom. So before you sign your name on a 30-year mortgage or a 72-month car loan, you have to run your own numbers and ask yourself this final question. Are you truly paying for an asset that builds wealth, or are you just buying a liability on a payment plan? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I highly encourage you to go run the 5% rule on your own life right now and see what the math tells you.